Hello, I'm Joseph. I am providing a bit of a developer update for the Raylib-PHP extension that I've worked on previously. It's been on hold. I'm just picking it back up. But there's some good news and there's also some bad news out of this. There was a comment made back in December, and like I said, this was on hold, so I didn't really touch it. But they wanted Raylib for support, and I did not work on it. This guy down here tried to attempt it, and then to say, you know what, I give up. I'm just going to use PHP FFI. If you know what that is, basically you can load up any DLL, SL library in PHP and call the raw native C functions and stuff like that. The only catch is that I think there's still some issues that you cannot do in the FFI that still needs to be implemented, but it's still very usable. I think it has to do with like reference pointers and stuff like that. But yeah, so there's that. He said, he gave up. So then this maintainer of the Raylib FFI version, so if you ever want to use Raylib and you don't want to use the XE extension and you just want to throw in a DLL and move forward with that, because those are already compiled, you can go ahead and do that. So it gives you very nice wrapper around the FFI interface, because it is not for the faint of heart. And it is, it's supporting Raylib 4 at that point. So I wrote, blah, blah, blah. But he kind of pointed out a good thing, which was that since Raylib 4, they actually provide metadata. So if you look at the JSON API, you can see that it's providing the structures with the types, descriptions of it, the enumerated values, the functions, all of that I can bring into on my end and automate a lot of this stuff rather than handwriting it. So as I learn how to do something in the C API for PHP, I can apply that to every single function support and not limit myself to just do like one thing. So for the past week, first I just did like an initial here's Raylib for support, which was I did what this guy was mentioning up here. It really wasn't that difficult. I think it was maybe like 30 minutes to an hour's worth of work. The general issue is that Raylib's 4.0 release is probably like the worst documented one thus far on support. But even then, there's still a lot of stuff, like there's audio missing, there's 3D features missing. If you want to do shaders, materials, all this other stuff, it's still missing from the API. And I still had a heck of a lot of work to do just to try to build that into my the C library. And what I was doing was wrapping these all up into like nice, neat functions. So like if it asked for an array, it also asked for the count of the array. I already know how to do that in PHP and C code. So there's no point to have the user of the API to repeat that. And so I wrapped them all into their own respective areas that you can import. It's fairly simple. But yeah, so this was the API. And so the bad news is that moving forward, this API will not exist. There will still be some things that are namespace just for the sake of, not having to clash so much into the global space of stuff. But I am keeping kind of the raw API that Raylib provides, just to have that ease of use. Now, I am using the JSON code that thing provides. So going back to that comment and going into Raylib 8, blah, 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 Raylib 4, and looking at this right here. So I am using this JSON code here, but I am having to modify it because it can't be used as is. There's a couple things here, so I'll just point them out. So like in C, you can have an asterisk next to it. It's a pointer. Now that pointer could be of anything. And normally you do type it, but the pointer could be a reference to a single entity or to a reference of an array. And it's not clear through the C API and the metadata that it provides whether it is an array or if it is a reference. And then if it is an array, what is the field that I have to look at in order to count for something? So I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of the code there just for that JSON file itself. So you can see kind of what I was talking about. Let me see if I can scroll to one real quick. No. Oh yeah, here we go. So for example, a rectangle asterisk. So rather than just being a reference to a single rectangle, I'm declaring it as an array here. So I add this is array and bring that in on my end. And then I use the count field. So in order to know how large this rectangle is to the C code, I can reference glyph count here. So yeah, it's you know, fairly simple. I think isref is another. Isref. There you go. So like camera here, you're gonna update the camera asterisk. It's not an array of cameras, it's a reference, so you pass it in. It's a very different setup in the way that I set up the C code for that. And then the last one, is there are certain things in Raylib that are just like hard coded. So for example, the material map is actually limited to 12, and so I got to iterate through all 12 because there's no actual guidance on how many materials are available for this here. But it shows me how to do that in Raylib C code, so I can just replicate that as needed. I haven't gotten to these here just yet, but for the most part, what I'm able to do now is provide over 300 functions. Those are iffy in support, but I am still working through all of these. So right now it is available for like alpha testing, but I did want to provide you guys with some good news, which is moving forward, a lot of this is going to be automatic. Now I am writing the C code, so I have a bunch of crappy code up here for now just to generate these things in C, and it generates about like 30,000 plus lines of code, and it lets me be able to basically compile and work off of it in near real time. So for example, if I do build, and let me look at build just to make sure. Yeah. So build's going to generate all the C code, clean it if there was any existing, and then your typical C structure or your C extension in PHP, you PHPize it, config, make clean. I don't think I need to make clean there, but anyways, you know, I can go ahead and run this and put time on it. I am screen recording, so it's gonna be a little bit slower. But basically, in less than 10 seconds, I can get everything all regenerated. This includes all the C code, the stub information. If you don't know what the stub information is for, so there we go, six whatever, and that wasn't even with the J tag. So if I do like J8 there, it'll be quicker because then it'll use multiple cores rather than one single core there. But yeah, so the stub itself, if you go to generate stub, you look at here, the stub information is basically what your editor needs to understand this, because because this is not like just a traditional PHP library that you compose or install with, you don't get any type information. So I have to regenerate all of that type of information, at least for your editor. You don't include this into your source code, but you have it on the side so your editor can read it and parse it. So then you get help on stuff. So for example, and when I go to one of the examples here, you get help on all the stuff here. So you get like it's an int void, it returns a void, blah blah blah. You know, when you do that, you can auto import it through your editor and stuff like that. So Visual Studio Code should be the same thing there. You know, you can see which all of these things provide and stuff like that. Get type help for it. So yeah, it's, you know, it's letting you get that type of information that you need to get, and providing in a way that hopefully makes sense to you. But yeah, that's what the stub is, and this is all generated in, like I said, less than 10 seconds, so I can quickly test and iterate and stuff. And it gives me all the C code, so I can go ahead and actually GDB or LLDB it and backtrace and see where an issue is happening and stuff like that. So I'm taking everything that I've learned thus far through the C API for PHP, the Zen API, I guess, at this point, and applying it there. So I just wanted to throw you like 3 quick examples. Like I said, remember, audio was still kind of missing and not 100% there. And then like 3D stuff was also missing. But because I'm automating all this stuff, I can now go ahead and start to do things that make a little bit more sense. So this is the camera 2D example. This worked on the old version 2. But you know, you can zoom in, zoom out. You get the rotation options here. And then what was it? Left and right to offset. Yeah. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory, and auto reset. So that's the basic thing there. And then there's the texture churling, so loading in textures and stuff like that. I'll bring that over here so you can see that's loading too. And this runs on Linux, Mac, both Intel and M1. This should work on Windows 2. I've just not had time to compile it just yet. So that's that. And then the last one, which was audio, which this wasn't really possible for because I didn't have all the supporting functions. But you can hear that play through. Yeah, so you know, this is the audio playing. It's doing everything it should be doing. At least I'm thinking it's doing it. So yeah, way better bass support. there's still things I need to do in the system. So, for example, there are things that I still need to do for unwrapping and rewrapping arrays. So, when you pass in a PHP array of like pixel data or vectors and stuff like that, some of the functions support it out of the box. Other things like properties getters and setters may not support that feature. So, I'm still working on that. The other thing is that there's probably like 20 functions that it can't just auto generate for, and because it needs better knowledge of Raylib on that. And so, for example, in Raylib, there's getPixel and setPixel, but getPixel and setPixel is a void star. When you look at the actually, let me go to the JSON API there. So you do getPixel. So yeah, you pass in some obscure void star something pointer, which is technically the pixel data. And the thing about that is that I need to write some custom code on it because the pixel data is based on the image format. So if you're passing in some data, it'll be able to know like, hey, based off this format, bring this in or something like that. But yeah, it's something that I just can't auto generate because of the void star. It's not enough, and I can't really um, just automate this because even if I put some type information in there, it's still based on the format of the image that you're bringing in there. So again, like set pixel colors and the same thing where it's a void star. So void star things that take in the params or return them and stuff like that, those things are not currently supported. It's about 20 functions. There's another handful of functions of like texture or text get and sets and like text modifiers like Pascal case, and none of that stuff is important to PHP because you can do all that in PHP itself. Like random, you don't need to do. It's supported though. Others like getting the window handler is another void star issue where it actually returns like the Cocoa for Mac OS or GDK for Linux or the Win32 API. So there's no way to actually support that. At least without going insane trying to figure out all that stuff out. But yeah, so it's a very good place right now in terms of like I have a good base to start to work off. On top of that, in that comment that person made about the Docker thing, I did get the Docker thing fixed. It wasn't actually finalized, and simply because I didn't know how to run Raylib inside of a Docker container because Docker doesn't support graphics at all. There's no graphic support. You technically would need to use something like VirtualBox, but even then, when you're using VirtualBox, like VirtualBox on Linux using Windows, is like limited to the OpenGL 1.1, I think, or 1.0, and you got to recompile Raylib with that special flag to get it was a huge mess. So basically, now I have it in there. If you look at the build again, it's it shows you kind of what's happening here. I'm using XVFB. I'm setting up the GLX extension and render. That should not be there. And then I'm exporting display as one. So when I run the Raylib examples, I can just see if they segment fault, or if I want, I can go ahead and install VNC and then VNC into the Docker container while it's running, just to verify everything is as it should be in running, or looking at least. It's going to be very slow because it's not like hot software supported, but yeah, it's very good looking forward, and there's a lot I still got to do, mainly with array data stuff, but it's available for alpha testing. If you go to the repository and not this, that's not mine. If you go to repository and you go from the master to develop, you can go ahead and see everything that is there for now. So you can see how everything's all working. There's the generate and the stub there and the example core. I still have to go update all the stub code and the other things that I have in Raylib. I think like the documentation website I need to adjust as well. And then I have the helpers I also need to update as well for that. So for example, if you want to do like sprite animations, my helper library helps with that, makes it a little easier, dead easy. You just provide the base sprite and the dimensions, and then it'll automatically animate as you need with that and stuff like that. So the helper library won't change at all because there's no reason to change it. It'll still be compatible, at least with the newer one. It's just changing out the base renderer there, and then hopefully upload or update it so it's including the auto reload feature, and then maybe preview my GUI stuff I was working on at some point.